If you allow the wrong person to get close enough, they won't just waste your time. They will slowly reshape your confidence. They will reduce your ambition, and they will make you question your own judgment. Today, I'm going to walk you through the 7 types of toxic people who quietly damage lives and how to recognize them before they gain access to yours. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever left a conversation feeling confused, smaller, or strangely guilty without clearly understanding why? That feeling was not random. Your nervous system senses danger faster than your conscious mind. The issue is that most people ignore that signal. They explain it away, they justify it. They give second chances to patterns that were obvious the first time. Let's correct that. The gaslighter is one of the most mentally destabilizing people you will ever meet because their weapon is not loudness, anger, or clear hostility. It is control over perception. They don't attack your body, they attack your sense of reality, and they do it gradually. It usually starts in a subtle way. They make a comment that hurts. When you react, they say, "You're too sensitive." They promise something, fail to follow through, and when you mention it, they reply, "I never said that." Notice what keeps happening. The event takes place. You respond naturally. Then your reaction becomes the problem. Over time, this creates mental conflict. You clearly remember what happened, but their confidence makes you question your own memory. Confidence does not disappear because you are wrong. It disappears because you are repeatedly told you are wrong about something you clearly experienced. Gaslighters depend on repetition and calm denial. The calmer they appear, the more unstable you seem. They may even involve others in subtle ways. "She's been forgetting things lately," they might say, planting small seeds that isolate you socially. Now you are not only doubting yourself in private, you begin to worry that others see you the same way. That isolation increases dependence, and dependence increases control. The most dangerous part is neurological. When your brain constantly receives mixed signals, what you saw versus what you're told, your stress response increases. Cortisol levels rise. Clear decision-making weakens. You become more open to suggestion because certainty feels comforting, even if it is false. The gaslighter then places themselves as the stable reference point. You can recognize this pattern by observing results instead of listening only to words. Do you often feel confused after simple conversations? Do you apologize for things you did not do? Do you collect proof before bringing up small concerns? If yes, the manipulation is already active. The chronic victim survives by shifting responsibility. At first, they seem unlucky, misunderstood, or constantly mistreated by others. Every story they tell has a clear villain, and it is never them. A bad boss, toxic friends, ungrateful partners, unfair systems. Patterns appear, but they never admit their part in those patterns. Instead, they invite you into their story as the safe and understanding ally. The hook is emotional. They trigger your empathy. You listen, you support, you confirm their feelings. In the beginning, it feels meaningful. You think you are helping someone who has simply had a series of bad experiences. But pay attention to what happens when real solutions are offered. They resist them. Advice is rejected. Opportunities are quietly ruined. If improvement happens, it does not last because real change would remove the identity that supports them. Over time, small changes occur. Their crises become more urgent and more frequent. Your time is spent managing their emotions. When something goes wrong in their life, they expect immediate help. When something goes wrong in your life, the focus quickly shifts back to them. Emotional balance fades away. What remains is duty. The most harmful part is blame shifting. Eventually, if you set limits or admit you are tired, you become the next villain in their story. Your boundaries are labeled as abandonment. Your exhaustion is described as cruelty. This traps you in a cycle of guilt, working harder to prove you are not what they suggest. Psychologically, they avoid responsibility because responsibility threatens their identity. Admitting fault requires change, and change requires effort and discomfort. Staying the victim keeps life predictable and under control. You will see the pattern if the same conflicts repeat with different people, if every failure is caused by someone else. and if your role slowly shifts from supporter to emotional caretaker without your agreement. The narcissistic controller does not start with domination. They start with admiration. They study you carefully, your goals, your fears, your values, and reflect them back with precision. In the early stage, you feel deeply understood. They praise your strengths, celebrate your uniqueness, and present themselves as your biggest supporter. This quick connection builds trust fast, and trust creates access. Once access is secured, quiet control begins. It starts with small corrections disguised as concern. That friend doesn't really support you. I just think you could present yourself better. These comments sound caring, but they plant doubt. Slowly, your independent relationships weaken. Social isolation rarely happens suddenly. It is built through repeated suggestions that only they truly understand you. Criticism increases, but in unpredictable ways. In public, they are charming and generous. In private, they question your decisions, your ability, even your loyalty. This inconsistency creates mental instability. You begin working harder to bring back the warmth they showed in the beginning. This type of inconsistent reward is powerful. Your brain becomes focused on earning approval instead of checking fairness. Control also shows up in decision shaping. They present choices in a way that makes their preferred outcome feel like your idea. They reward agreement with affection and punish resistance with emotional distance. The message is clear even if it is never spoken. Peace depends on your alignment. Over time, your world becomes smaller. You ask for their opinion before making choices you once made alone. Your confidence reduces while their authority grows. The main feature is not loud pride, but careful influence. They maintain a sense of superiority while positioning you as dependent on their guidance. You can spot this pattern when your independence decreases, when disagreement feels unsafe, and when your self-trust slowly fades under the pressure of their control. The energy vampire does not need arguments to drain you. Their effect is physical. You feel it in your shoulders, your breathing, the heaviness behind your eyes after spending time with them. They dominate attention in quiet but constant ways. Conversations revolve around their experiences, their problems, their thoughts. If you try to change the subject, it returns to them quickly. They often appear overwhelmed by life. Every interaction feels urgent. There is always a new issue, a new drama, a new emotional surge that needs discussion. You become their stabilizer. Your calm relaxes them. Your advice comforts them. Your presence reassures them. But the exchange is rarely equal. When you share something meaningful, their interest is short before attention shifts back to them. Unlike more openly manipulative personalities, the energy vampire may not plan harm. The drain happens because they lack emotional independence. They depend on others to manage their feelings. Over time, this creates imbalance. You prepare for their needs before thinking of your own. You may even practice conversations in your mind, planning responses to expected complaints. There is also a pattern of boundary weakening. They call late at night. They stretch conversations beyond natural endings. They ignore subtle signs that you are tired or busy. If you try to shorten the interaction, they increase emotion to pull you back. This teaches you to stay involved, to avoid guilt or discomfort. Neurologically, repeated exposure to high emotional intensity without rest raises stress levels. Your body treats their constant intensity like a small threat. Long exposure leads to tiredness, irritation, and lower focus. You will recognize the pattern when relief fills your body the moment they leave, when you need recovery time after simple talks, and when your energy regularly drops around them. If someone comes to mind right now, do not ignore that signal. And if this feels personal, stay with me. The envious sabotager rarely shows their jealousy openly. In fact, they often present themselves as your supporter. They attend your events, respond to your achievements, and publicly recognize your progress. But underneath, comparison never stops. Your success triggers their insecurity, and instead of using that discomfort to improve themselves, they redirect it toward lowering you. The sabotage begins quietly. When you share a new goal, they respond with doubt, hidden as realism. Are you sure that's stable? That field is risky. I just don't want you to be disappointed. The words sound protective, but the tone carries discouragement. Over time, their reactions train you to hide your ambition around them. You begin reducing your excitement. Small undermining follows. Jokes about your success. Compliments with a hidden sting. Must be nice to have that kind of luck. The hidden message is that your achievements are accidental, unearned, or temporary. This slow reframing weakens your inner belief in your ability. They may also interfere indirectly, holding back useful information, not following through on promises that affect your progress, offering advice that seems helpful but slightly moves you off track. The changes are small enough to defend, but steady enough to create resistance in your momentum. Psychologically, envy creates tension because it forces comparison instead of facing their own feelings of inadequacy. They try to restore balance by pulling you downward. The relationship turns competitive in ways you never agreed to. You may notice hesitation when sharing good news, sensing subtle distance after success, or facing unexpected obstacles when they are deeply involved in your plans. The harm builds quietly through doubt, delay, and lowered confidence until your path slows under the weight of their hidden resentment. The boundary breaker does not view limits as rules. They treat them as discussions. When you say no, they hear possibility. When you express discomfort, they see uncertainty. Their main trait is persistence against clearly stated lines. At first, the violations are small. They borrow without permission. They arrive without notice. They push for personal information you chose not to share. Each event seems minor alone, which makes confrontation feel unnecessary. They depend on social pressure and politeness. If you resist, they laugh and minimize it, framing your reaction as too much. Relax, I was joking. You're too serious. The hidden message is that your boundaries are unreasonable. Over time, this reframing makes you question your own limits. You begin negotiating with yourself before they even push. Escalation happens slowly. Once small boundaries are ignored without consequence, bigger ones follow. Time boundaries disappear as they expect instant responses. Privacy boundaries weaken as they enter spaces, physical or emotional, that you never truly allowed. Emotional boundaries start to weaken when people expect you to always be available no matter how much energy or time you actually have. Every time a violation goes unchallenged, it silently teaches them that your access can be stretched further. The psychological effect builds slowly over time. When your limits are crossed again and again, your sense of control begins to shrink. You might feel irritation that you cannot fully explain because each separate incident seems small or reasonable on its own. This uncertainty works in their favor. They move in gray zones where intentions can be denied and responsibility can be reduced. People who break boundaries are not always loud or openly aggressive. Many of them are socially smooth. They present intrusion as closeness and pushiness as passion. The pattern becomes obvious when you feel relief when they are not around, tension before replying to their messages, or exhaustion from having to defend simple limits that should have been respected the first time you said them. That quiet stress is information. It tells you something important is happening beneath the surface. The charismatic manipulator is the hardest to notice because their power lies in social awareness. They read rooms quickly, copy body language naturally, and adjust their tone to match whoever they are speaking with. In the beginning, interactions feel intense and exciting. They appear confident without seeming arrogant, attentive without being invasive, driven without feeling threatening. You may feel selected, understood, even lifted in their presence. That feeling is not accidental. What makes them risky is careful calibration. They quietly observe your weak spots, your need for appreciation, your fear of failing, your desire to belong. They store this information without announcing it. Later, they use it with precision. Encouragement appears exactly when your confidence drops. Reassurance shows up when you begin to step back. They create a cycle of pressure and comfort that ties you to them emotionally. Influence does not come through commands. It happens through suggestion. They plant thoughts in ways that seem cooperative. Have you thought about this? Maybe it would be better if. The decisions feel like yours, but the framing limits your choices. Over time, you might notice your opinions starting to match theirs more closely. Your priorities slowly shift toward their goals. You may not see it happen in one clear moment. It happens gradually, almost invisibly. They also manage how others see them. Around different people, they appear polished, persuasive, and reasonable. They build a reputation that shields them from doubt. If conflict appears, their calm and controlled behavior stands in sharp contrast to your emotional reaction, making you look unstable or reactive. This social protection strengthens their influence. One of the most advanced tactics is creating dependency. They position themselves as connectors, mentors, or protectors. They become the person who can open doors, provide information, or solve problems. Slowly, your progress begins to feel linked to their approval. Disagreement starts to feel risky because they control access, opportunities, or influence. You recognize this dynamic when admiration slowly turns into reliance, when your confidence rises or falls depending on their validation, when stepping away feels like losing an advantage you did not realize they had quietly built over you. Awareness without action feels powerful, but often it is just a refined form of avoidance. You can identify every manipulation tactic, name every unhealthy pattern, even predict someone's next move, and still stay close to them. Knowledge creates a false sense of control. You tell yourself that because you see the behavior clearly, it no longer affects you. That belief is where the real damage continues. Your nervous system does not respond to intellectual understanding. It responds to exposure. If you regularly spend time around someone who lies, criticizes, drains your energy, or manipulates situations, your body absorbs that stress whether you understand it or not. Stress hormones increase. Your posture becomes guarded. You stay alert, scanning for the next problem. Over time, this becomes normal. You adapt in order to survive the environment instead of changing the environment itself. There is also a mental trap called cognitive consistency. Once you invest time, emotion, effort, or reputation into a relationship, your brain resists the idea that it might have been a mistake. Admitting that action is needed means admitting that you already paid a cost. So instead of acting, you analyze. You collect more examples. You wait for clearer proof. You hope for a dramatic moment that justifies change. Meanwhile, the pattern repeats again and again. Unhealthy dynamics continue not because they are hard to understand, but because they are allowed. At some point, clarity turns into responsibility. Boundaries bring discomfort. Distance can cause backlash. Taking action might disturb social circles or professional structures. But without real behavioral change, less access, stronger limits, reduced exposure, nothing truly changes. You will know that awareness has turned into avoidance when you can describe the problem perfectly, yet still hesitate to apply consequences. When talking about the issue replaces making decisions about the issue. When insight becomes a substitute for bravery. Recognition is the first step. But without enforcement, recognition quietly becomes permission for the pattern to continue without interruption. That is the uncomfortable reality. None of these people begin by appearing harmful. They enter your life as friends, partners, coworkers, supporters. The damage does not come through dramatic explosions. It comes through slow erosion. One small doubt at a time, one limit crossed, one subtle decrease in confidence. Then one day you look up and notice you are thinking smaller, speaking softer, and accepting more than you ever would have before. Toxic individuals rarely destroy lives through open force. They do it through access. Every person you allow close to you influences your standards, your emotions, and your direction. Nearness shapes identity. If someone repeatedly confuses you, drains your energy, controls your choices, weakens your confidence, or manipulates your decisions, the cost is not only emotional discomfort. The cost is your future direction. It is your growth. It is your self-trust. The answer is not confrontation just for drama. It is clarity followed by movement. Shorter conversations, stronger limits, less availability, no extra explanations beyond what is required. You do not need their agreement in order to protect your standards. Watch patterns instead of apologies. Observe results instead of promises. Pay attention to the tension in your body before you silence it with logic. Your body often understands before your mind is ready to admit it.